Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ag Innovation News Podcast, presented by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute of Minnesota. I'm Dan Scogan, your host for Ag Innovation News Podcast. Guests on this podcast shed light on innovations in value-added agriculture. They highlight important voices and work that's being done throughout the Minnesota ag sector, and educate the public about resources and organizations that support Minnesota agriculture. Today, we welcome to the Ag Innovation News Podcast, Deeann Lufkin, one of the owners of CannonBelles Cheese, coffee and ice cream out of Cannon Falls, Minnesota. Deeann Lufkin, welcome to the Ag Innovation News Podcast.
Thank you very much.
Well, let's get some background. I know you and two partners are the CannonBelles, but tell me about yourself and your business partners a little bit, Kathy and Jackie.
I am a retired Air Force meteorologist. In my previous life, I was a hurricane hunter. So I have no ag background. I grew up in the Twin Cities. My parents are from the Iron Range. I did not grow up on a farm. I did go to Iowa State University to get my degree, which has a very large ag program. But again, I didn't do any of it. My husband and I moved back to Minnesota about 20 years ago. And when we did, we went town shopping and found Northfield. And from there, I met my two girlfriends, Jackie Oman and Kathy Huff, who are now my business partners. And really, cheese making started as a hobby that developed into a business from there. Jackie is originally from Humboldt, Iowa. She was a youth pastor. She married a dairy farmer who no longer milks, but he has other agricultural ventures. And Kathy grew up on a dairy farm, used to have her own dairy farm, but then had left it for a while and worked in ministry also, but really wanted to get back into dairy. So when Jackie and I asked her to join us in our venture, she was quick to say yes. In fact, she didn't let us finish our sentence before she said yes to joining us. So that's a little bit about it.
But Deeann, it's a long stretch from hurricane hunting to making cheese. How did you ever cultivate that?
My stepson sent me a brew your own beer at home kit, so I was making beer in my house. Jackie was making wine in her house, and we taught each other how to make beer and wine, but we couldn't finish it before it went bad. So she had all this milk, and we decided to ferment milk, and it was pretty good. So this just kept going. I was getting ready to retire from the Air Force, so I needed something else to do with my life. And I was just trying to figure it out for the last about 5 years of my Air Force career, and I just couldn't figure it out. I married an airline pilot whose schedule is not normal. Jackie's husband is a farmer, his schedule is not normal. So we thought, if we start our own business, we can control our own schedules to see our husbands. That was a good idea. It doesn't work that way. But we really did this specifically with our husbands in mind, but we have less control over our schedules than we've ever had in our lives. So that's kind of how that leap happened. People ask me, was it hurricane hunting terrifying? But honestly, starting a small ag-based business is more terrifying than flying into any hurricane I ever flew in.
Today, we're going to talk about CannonBelles. Tell me about the company. Tell me what you do there.
CannonBelles Cheese, we started over 12 years ago in the kitchen as a hobby. We made it an official business over 8 years ago. We started making cheese at the University of Minnesota because that was really the only place for us to rent commercial cheese making equipment at the time, because it is illegal to make cheese in your kitchen and sell it to people. We do not fall under those cottage food licenses like other people that make jams and jellies can do. We have to make it in a commercial space. So we went there and were there for almost 7 years while we were trying to figure out how to build our own cheese plant here in Cannon Falls. And so we opened our plant 2 years ago. It was actually good that it took us 7 years to build the plant because we were able to do our homework and make sure we had the right equipment. So once we opened, and actually even before we opened, we started making cheddar, Gouda, Colby, cheese curds, of course, and queso fresco, which is a Spanish style cheese. We're the only ones around us that make this style cheese. And in fact, it's one that we won first place for at the American Cheese Society.
Very good. So, for our listeners who don't know, what is an artisanal cheese?
An artisanal cheese is basically a handmade cheese. So it's not just computers and a bunch of machinery doing it where you just punch buttons. We stir the salt in by hand. We feel those curds to make sure it's the right texture. So it's an art to it versus just pressing buttons. So it's really a made by hand product and usually smaller scale.
So you may have already answered my next question. Are you processing the cheeses yourself And what does that process look like?
We are making them ourselves. We get in our milk at 2 a.m. from Square Deal Dairy in Randolph. They're I believe, a fifth generation family farm that has about 600 cows. So that milk comes to us at 2 in the morning. We take just a little bit of their tanker of milk. Then we pasteurize it and then add our good cheese cultures and rennet and all the other ingredients that we need to make cheese. The whole process, it depends on the type of cheese we're making, but it takes anywhere from 6 to 12 hours to make a cheese.
Are you spending 6 to 12 hours a day in the cheese shop, or do you have staff?
And we do have staff. On the days we make cheese, it's anywhere from 2 to 5 people that are making it with us, depending on the ingredients that we're putting in it. So our cheese curds, we have 8 different flavors. So let's say our Grim Reaper cheese curds, they have jalapeno, serrano, habanero, and Carolina Reaper peppers. We mix those peppers all in by hand. So we put our plain cheese curds in like a bus tub, and then we will pour the peppers over them and mix them up by hand really carefully. So the more flavors we're doing, the more people we have on hand to mix those for us so that we don't have to stay here till late into the night. We also have more people in for salting that cheese because 400 or 500 pounds of cheese curds is kind of tough to salt at once. So the more hands, the easier it is. It's quite the adventure. Currently, we employ one male, rest are women making this cheese.
Is the process something you could teach me, or does it have to be somebody who has had some technical education on cheese making?
We could teach anybody how to make cheese. It's an art, but it's also a science. So when we were making beer and wine, we could have some wiggle room in temperature, but cheese is very different. 1 degree of temperature can have a significant impact. We had a thermometer that was off by 2 degrees. When I fixed it, we all of a sudden got 20 more pounds of cheese out of that milk. So just that tiny amount. So you just have to be able to pay attention. But honestly, we can pretty much teach anybody how to do it. None of us have a food science degree, not a single one of us in this building. So we're kind of on the job kind of training. That's kind of where my military training comes into play because with the military, you move so often, you have to write every tiny step down. And so that's what we do here. We have lots of how-to guides, try to idiot proof it on this is how you make cheddar and this is how you run the pasteurizer. So lots of how-to guides around this plant to try to help you know the next steps in this process.
So, Deann, you went through several varieties of cheese that you make. How do you decide? Was that the 7 years before you built the cheese shop, or have you added more varieties since? Are you still thinking about more varieties, or reducing some of them, or how do you make that decision?
That's a really good question. I went to the cheesemaker short course in University of Wisconsin River Falls. From there, we met a cheese consultant who slowed us way down and helped us build the building blocks for building a good business. But he told us to do market research, to go to all the places that we know of selling cheese within 25 miles of us, to see what holes there were in the market. We had developed our queso fresco recipe in the kitchen, and we quickly found out there wasn't any cheese like that at all in the market. So we knew that that was our foot in the door. We also really like Gouda, but some of it can be pretty expensive. So we wanted to make Gouda that was more approachable for the everyday person. And cheese curds are just a basic. Every cheesemaker around here needs to make cheese curds. So those are the three that we settled on at the beginning. Cheddar we ended up making because our cheese curds are cheddar based, so we would have extra curds that we would press into blocks and have cheddar. We knew the market was flooded with that, so that wasn't a high priority item for us at the time. But once our cheddar made it to 18 months of age, it tasted really good and started taking off and people wanted it. Then we felt that it was important to add a new cheese about every year, new cheese or new flavor. So a few years ago at the University of Minnesota, we asked how to make Colby. So we learned how to do that because there's not a lot of local Colby meat being made. Our next cheese that we plan on making will be mozzarella because we've had a lot of people ask us to make that. Some fresh mozzarella balls and things like that. We also develop new flavors for our cheeses, the different spices or peppers that we add. We like playing with those and experimenting. In fact, our spice guy comes from Northfield, Joe Mama's barbecue sauce and seasonings. And he mixes up all of our spices for us. He's in the plant today doing it because it's a commercial space. Our spices are blended in our building. They are truly local. He has a food science degree, and so we told him we want a cranberry cheddar. And so he added a little bit of cinnamon and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So bringing him on board has really helped us elevate the flavors in our cheeses. So we've been having fun playing with different flavors with him too. It's more doing market research, seeing where there's holes, but also talking to customers at farmers markets and different groups we're in and seeing what they would like.
The point I was going to make as I listened to you tell that story, it sounds like you continue to keep your ear toward the consumer and are trying to, as best you can, meet their needs.
Yes, definitely. And so farmers markets or different sales events that we go to, our coffee shop, talking to people there and seeing what they would like, but just also going to different workshops and different publications that we read and seeing what the trends are out there and trying to get an idea or just simply what we like.
How many pounds of cheese are you making in a year or a month, or I don't know how you're measuring it, but you're putting out?
We currently make cheese twice a week. And each of those days, we're making about 500 pounds of cheese. So about 1,000 pounds of cheese a week. So about 4,000 pounds of cheese a month. We can add cheese makes in as needed. So as we get closer to the holidays, cheese demand goes up each month. So we'll probably need to be adding at least one more make a week into there, maybe more. So it can vary. There's less cheese at the beginning of the year made than there is at the end.
And I do want to spend some time talking about your coffee and your ice cream as well, but where can consumers find your cheese? Is there an easy place to find it?
Yeah, so if you go to our website, cannonbelles.com, and actually cannonbelles.com/cheese gets you to the cheese information. And on there, you can find the locations where cheese is sold. We're in about 80 different locations, some breweries and wineries, a bunch of different Hy-Vees, co-ops, all the fresh time markets in the state. And that kind of changes as my business partner, Kathy, goes out and gets us even more stores.
I do want to remind our listeners that we're visiting today with Deeann Lufkin. She's one of the owners of CannonBelles Cheese, coffee and ice cream shop out of Cannon Falls, Minnesota, and you're listening to the Ag Innovation News podcast. Deanna, I want to change directions a little bit and get to the coffee shop and ice cream shop as well. What's the backstory there?
First, I'll go back a little bit further and why we're in Cannon Falls. I live in Northfield, my partners live in Randolph, and the town of Cannon Falls heard that we existed, and there's a lot of local foods being made in Cannon Falls. So the town asked us to come visit because they thought we would be a good fit. And we quickly realized this was the perfect town for us to build our business. About 10 years ago, we made Cannon Falls our home. We kept wanting to have business meetings over coffee in town, but there was no coffee shop, which was a challenge. And then it was taking so long to build this cheese plant that Jackie and Kathy had full time jobs at the churches. And they were both talking on the phone a couple weeks before Christmas saying, if this didn't work out, I'd own a coffee shop. I would too. We should look into that. And then they asked somebody in Cannon Falls about it who said, oh, yeah, I heard the ice cream shop wants to sell. You should talk to them. And then they talked to the ice cream shop and they said, yeah, we do want to sell. And then they told me 1 week before Christmas, I found out. They did tell me I didn't have to join them in the efforts, but it was a no-brainer. So 5 years ago, we opened up CannonBelles Coffee and Ice Cream in downtown Cannon Falls. We're a kitty corner from the Cannon River Winery, and it's the best coffee shop in town. It's the only one, but it's the best one. A great meeting place between the Twin Cities and Rochester, right off of 52. We never had plans of having a retail shop at our cheese plant within the first 3 years of opening the cheese plant because everybody we talked to said, don't do that right away because you'll have to pay somebody to sell your cheese, and that's a body you don't need right now. So retail wasn't on our mind until we opened up the shop. So we actually had a retail space open before we opened our plant, which was kind of helpful. It helped build our brand, educate people on our queso fresco because it's so unique. So we make grilled cheese sandwiches and all of our breakfast sandwiches using that queso fresco. So it introduces people to it, teaches them how to use it, and plus it's just good. So that's how that started. We then thought for a little bit about making our own ice cream, but because we were making cheese at the University of Minnesota, we were able to ask the plant manager, Ray Miller, what we would need to make ice cream. And it is a lot of equipment. And we thought, oh no, we don't want to do that. So we kept buying ice cream from Cedar Crest out of Wisconsin, which was the company the original ice cream shop bought their ice cream from. So we don't make the ice cream. We let the experts do that.
I was so hoping that you also made the ice cream, but good for you for having good business sense on what you should do and what you shouldn't do and what you should have others doing. I guess that's a big part of being an entrepreneur, knowing all of the answers to those questions.
Well, the challenge is that cheese making equipment is all stainless steel, which in this world is very expensive. There is no starter plant that you can do anymore. You have to go all out. And so it's just cost prohibitive for us to do anything other than cheese right now. However, we did build our cheese plant too big, probably twice as big as we need right now, so that we can add ice cream making or bottling milk or yogurt or butter. We can do some other dairy product down the line as we get our feet under us.
Do you think that's on the table someday?
Bottling milk is definitely on the table. We love the milk we're getting from Square Deal Dairy. Plus, selfishly, owning a coffee shop, we would like to get our milk cheaper. So it would help that way. But I know that the farm that we work with has a similar vision to us, educating people about the benefits of dairy. They would like to be able to tell people their milk goes into this exact bottle. So if we can have a one farm bottle of milk, there is a growing demand for that kind of thing too. So that is our dream, to bottle their milk one day. But that's more dairy regulations and more expensive equipment. So that's 2 to 5 years down the road.
You don't see yourself buying a herd of cows, though, and producing your own.
Oh, God, no. No, no. Now, Kathy would tell you yes, but again, I am the Twin Cities representative of the partners, and my answer is no.
We have entrepreneurs who listen to our podcasts, Deann, and I just want you to think back. What do you remember the most about getting this whole process started that maybe entrepreneurs should just be aware of?
We're in a lots of business peer groups, and I hear similar things. This just started out of something we were interested in and something we developed in our kitchen. So we kind of fell into it. But you have to have perseverance and you have to have some courage. And I think you need to be just slightly insane. You don't understand what you're doing is bad. No, but the perseverance, because we just kept being told no, and all these challenges kept coming up. And so we just had to keep pivoting and finding a new way to get to where we wanted to be. But each no was actually good for us in the long run because we ended up exactly where we should be.
Have you had any supply chain issues?
A lot of people have. Our supply chain issues more come with packaging. The bags we get for our cheese, we vacuum seal all of our cheese, and then our block cheeses, like our cheddars and goudas, we put those in vacuum seal bags and then shrink that bag down. Those shrink bags have like a polymer epoxy kind of thing that came from China originally, our original company. So when COVID hit, finding those ingredients to make the bags was really hard. And then the lead time to ordering these bags grew by many, many months. So we have to think so much further ahead for our boxes and bag needs. That was our challenge. Now, our ingredients are not a challenge because we truly buy local. Not over 90% of our ingredients come from within 25 miles of our plant in Cannon Falls. Our peppers come from a farm just outside of Cannon Falls. Like I said, our spices are being blended here today. So we try to get as much as we can from our local farm neighbors around us. Because of that, we didn't have those issues getting peppers.
And even your ice cream is basically local when you think about worldwide or nationwide shipments.
Yep, although they did have some issues. So in the summer, we saw some favorite flavors going down because they just couldn't meet up with the demand of that because they had problems keeping some people hired or different things like that. So every once in a while, we'd see some problems in the summer with ice cream, but not as much as other people might have seen.
Deann, of course, this podcast is presented by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute, AURI. We work a lot with entrepreneurs and value-added agricultural products and processes. Did AURI have a role in your product development or getting you to the grocery store?
Yes, definitely. Actually, more than that, they helped us with our nutrition labels. As the entrepreneurs listening to this probably know, when you start a business, you have no money. So spending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to get each flavor and type of cheese that we have to be scientifically studied to figure out our nutrition labels, it was almost cost prohibitive. But at AURI, They say they're affordable, but it was beyond affordable. I mean, it was almost free. It was a huge thing for us because what we were able to do with that then is we were able to get into schools. In Minnesota, we have the farm to school program where schools get grant money to buy locally produced foods, good quality foods for kids. Simply having the nutrition label that AURI made for us got us in that door. And it made us then be able to provide thousands of pounds of cheese to these schools. So it was markets that we didn't have available to us without that help from AURI.
So, Deann, when you and your partner sit down and think about the future, what is the future for CannonBelles? What do you see in the next 10 to 15 years?
That is a really good question. If you talk to the three of us separately, you'll probably get a different answer. But in reality, we just want to make the best dairy products that we can, the highest quality. We want it to be approachable. We're not these fancy frou-frou people that you're going to have this one specific bottle of wine for this one bite of cheese. We are not those girls. If you want that, we can do that for you. But we want to be approachable and grow that business. We also want to be able to provide more income for that farm, that dairy farm. So the dairy prices are so low. We want to provide that outlet for that farm and help that farm strengthen too. We also want to educate people on the benefits of dairy and increase that market in general and educate people on the fact that there are Minnesota cheesemakers. In fact, in Minnesota, the cheesemakers in Minnesota have more awards per capita than Wisconsin cheesemakers. So we're doing something good here. I do know my partner Kathy's goal in life is to have CannonBelles cheese curds be the cheese curd of the state fair because right now they're being made in Wisconsin, which feels very wrong to us. So that's Kathy's goal in life to do that. But really, we just want to be able to expand. We have almost unlimited growth here because we can add cheese makes at a whim. So it's just kind of fun. I honestly, 7 years ago, I wouldn't have seen that we'd be where we are today. We have plans, but yet at the same time, we've learned to have some flexibility in those plans because we know everything can change.
And if our listeners today want more information about the company, the owners, where's a good place to get some of that?
You can go to cannonbelles.com or follow us on social media. Our handle's just at CannonBelles. And, you can see what we're doing there, check out our pictures. You can drop us a line, drop us an email on our website. You can get a hold of us there. If anybody wants a tour for a group at the cheese plant, we're happy to do that. Anything we can do to improve the state of dairy in Minnesota is something we're pretty excited about.
Well, Deann, I've enjoyed the conversation, and I think you've got a great story to tell. I hope people will look you up and enjoy some of your artisanal cheeses, maybe have a cup of coffee and an ice cream cone when they're in Cannon Falls someday as well.
Yeah, we hope so.
We've been visiting with Deeann Lufkin. She is one of the owners of CannonBelles Cheese and also the coffee and ice cream shop that you'll find in Cannon Falls, Minnesota. In fact, it's the best coffee shop in Cannon Falls. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and thank you for listening to the Ag Innovation News Podcast presented by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute of Minnesota. I want to thank my podcast crew, Lisa Martinez, AURI Communications Manager and the editor of this production. To learn more about AURI, go to auri.org.